Oh, hey, good morning, Indiana. New intro theme. Who dis? Good morning. I am Scott Aaron Rogers. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning news and politics show for the Hoosier State. I am recording from Bloomington. I've got a great couple of guests here to join me today. Lots to talk about. Once again, let us take a drink from the fire hose together. First, the pitch. This is an independent media project here. We don't paywall any content. We don't have any advertisers. We certainly don't have any billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network at large that we refuse to hide valuable information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. I, in particular, could use the help. This show is a lot of work. I am the curator, writer, director, producer, host, moderator, and, clip maker, all of the things. Doesn't pay a whole hell of a lot. So we could really use your help here. And listen, if it's not in the cards right now, I get it. That's fine. There's a lot going on in this world. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews is a big help. We always use your feedback on ways we can improve the show. Also, we could really use a follow on social media. You can follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us. On the rest, it's just at Who's Left. And Progressive Indiana Network. Listen, we've only been doing this for about a month and a half under that brand. So our handle there is the full spelled out Progressive Indiana Network on most social media sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, where you don't get all those characters, it's PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Now, let us welcome in our guests. First, couple returning guests, by the way. Old pros know what they're doing. Let's first welcome our good friend Ross Thomas, chair of the Bartholomew County Democratic Party, and also candidate for the state Senate there in District 41, which is Columbus. Good morning, Ross.
Hey, good morning. Good to see you.
Always enjoy having you here. Lots of legal stuff comes up when we do these shows. Good to have an attorney who knows what the hell they're talking about, because God knows I don't.
I don't know what's going on most of the time, I have to tell you, with the nonsense that we see day to day. It's tough to keep up.
It certainly is. And it's also good to have a good friend like Chelsea McDonnell joining us here today to keep us company in these incredibly trying times. Good morning, Chelsea.
Morning. I loved the new intro, by the way. I was smiling the whole time I was watching it.
Oh, thank you. I forgot to mention the theme music is by our good friend, singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss. Up in Valparaiso. She has been on the show herself. We love Leslie, and she is also an incredibly talented musician. So thanks to her for letting us use her music. So guys, let us dig in. There's a lot. In fact, there's so much this week that we can't even begin to get to things like the Olympics are going on, and U.S. athletes are, kind of having a hard time reconciling the fact that they're wearing the uniform of our country, and also our country is up to no good, and they have to answer for that on the podium or at the press conference, and the president's criticizing them for it. President is also going after Canada, potentially blocking the opening of a new international bridge between Detroit and Ontario. We've got corruption with the Justice Department looking to wipe out Steve Bannon's conviction for contempt of court, defying the January 6th committee. There are measles outbreaks going on throughout the country. And, potentially war with Iran on the horizon. So lots going on. Don't even get to really talk about those things because we have to talk about gross stuff like the Epstein Files. So this week, on Monday, Epstein's partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, appeared virtually before the House Oversight Committee and refused to answer any questions, pleading the fifth. Now, her attorney said she would answer questions if the president granted her clemency, stating, quote, only she can provide the complete account, and that her testimony would exonerate both Trump and former President Bill Clinton of any wrongdoing. We also found out this week the scope of Maxwell's role in the Clinton circle. It turns out she, quote, this is from the New York Times, played a substantial role in supporting the creation of the Clinton Global Initiative, an offshoot of the Clinton Foundation that brings together leaders from business and government in the nonprofit sector, aiming to tackle global challenges. It's sort of like Bill Clinton's personal Davos. This took place in 2004 before Epstein's first indictment, and though Clinton is said to have stopped speaking with Epstein before 2006, Maxwell attended Chelsea Clinton's wedding in 2010 and told the DOJ she last saw Bill between 2016 and 2018. She says Clinton was her friend, not Epstein's. So, also Monday, select members of Congress were able to view unredacted Epstein Files at the DOJ office building, where lawmakers were given access to 4 whole computers and allowed to take only written notes. Now, Jamie Raskin, House member from Maryland, accused the department of being in cover-up mode and breaking the law, noting, quote, mysterious redactions that obscured the names of abusers while allowing the names of victims to become public, which he blamed on either spectacular incompetence and sloppiness or as a deliberate threat to other survivors who are thinking about coming forward. Now, Representatives Ro Khanna of California and Thomas Massie of Kentucky, a Republican, accused the DOJ of going beyond the scope of redactions permitted by the law they wrote, which compelled the release of the Epstein Files by December 19th, and which we still only have about half of, by the way. These lawmakers were only given access to the half that have been released. Massie threatened to release the names of 6 potential co-conspirators on the floor of the House, where he is protected by the speech and debate clause, but said he would give the DOJ an opportunity to correct their mistakes. Now, listen. We're not getting any consequences yet in this country, but high-profile resignations and replacements across the pond are coming into focus. So we mentioned these 6 potential co-conspirators whose names remain hidden. Well, in the UK, we know at least one potential client of Epstein's, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince. He was stripped of his title last year, remember. Also in Great Britain, Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government is teetering as some MPs from his own Labour Party have called for his resignation over having appointed Epstein confidant Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. A week and a half ago, we saw Brad Karp resign as chairman of prestigious white shoe law firm Paul Weiss when his exchanges with Epstein became public. Now, that is here in the States, as is the resignation of Kathy Rumler, former Obama White House counsel, who said she would resign her position as chief legal officer at Goldman Sachs. Now, back on the other side of the world, DP World, a Dubai-based logistics giant, replaced their chairman, Sultan Hamed bin Sulayam, after his friendship with Epstein was exposed. Up in Norway, former Prime Minister Thorbjørn Jagland was charged Thursday in his country with aggravated corruption in connection with an investigation related to the files release. Also in Norway, Mona Yule, ambassador to Jordan, resigned after it was revealed Epstein left $10 million to her children in his will. In France, former culture minister Jack Lang, good French name, stepped down from his post as head of the Arab World Institute in Paris over financial ties to Epstein. And in Slovakia, national security advisor and former president of the UN General Assembly, Miroslav Lajcek, resigned over text messages with Epstein, wherein they discussed quote-unquote gorgeous girls. More Epstein stuff to talk about, but let's take a break there and get into this. Ross, what do you make of this setup where at the DOJ, where these lawmakers were allowed to go in and look at some of these unredacted files on a whopping 4 computers, and they were only allowed to take written notes.
Well, I think part of the problem with the entire process at this point is you're seeing a sort of a mixture between law and politics. So Maxwell's case is over. She has exhausted her last appeal. She has no Fifth Amendment privilege at all in a court of law because she's already been convicted. So double jeopardy attaches. She can't not be convicted again for what she has done. So a person who's been convicted loses their Fifth Amendment privilege. You unless it's something new and a different crime that you subjected yourself to, then you have that right. But in a court of law, a witness can plead the Fifth, but if you can't plead the Fifth just blanket. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to. It has to be something that's going to incriminate you, number one. And number two, it has to be something that you don't have immunity for. Now, that immunity can be double jeopardy. That immunity can also be giving you immunity. And that happens in courtrooms every day. A person says, I don't want to talk. So, well, we're giving you immunity. Anything that you say here isn't going to be used against you later. Well, guess what? If you don't talk then, you're in contempt. So that part of it is sort of laughable that she can just say, and certainly you can't say, I'll talk if I get clemency. But again, we're not talking about a court of law. We're talking about Congress. And the same thing is true with these, the parameters that the DOJ puts on these lawmakers. You're not in a court of law. You're not entitled to discovery. But you're the Congress of the United States. So if they had the will, they certainly could say, we're telling you how this is going to be. We're in an upside down world where this fascist executive branch simply ignores the Congress. And of course, the quisling Republican Congress is more than happy, for the most part, to go right along. So look, the DOJ can put whatever parameters they want, as long as the cowards in the Congress allow them to, it continues to happen.
Chelsea, what do you make of the fact that we're actually seeing repercussions for folks on the other side of the Atlantic, but here, you know, we get a couple attorneys resigning from prestigious law firms. They're going to be okay.
You know, this is something that I've actually been talking about a lot to people. You know, America in general as a country, we've really lost our way. There are things that just do not affect us as a society the way that it should. Violence being that number one thing, especially violence against children. That violence against children tells you everything that you need to know about a society. And it is something that we should be trying to break away from and get away from, and it should be getting better. And unfortunately, I think it's getting worse. And, you know, there's something that I tell people. I have 2 young ones. I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. And something that we taught them was when you do something wrong, you apologize. And so my kids say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. And then we have a conversation. This is something that a 6 and a 7-year-old understand, and they're very good at it. You know, they might get upset at first, but give them a minute to work it out, and then they do it. Where is that? Where is that in our society? I mean, even just simply the 3 of us on this show right now, we are in circles with people who we think like us, right? But even they have a hard time having any kind of accountability. So in my mind, this is a severe sickness in humans, and I don't know what we can do about it.
Well, you know, Chelsea, listen, the 6 and 7-year-olds don't have their own personal concierge attorney general in the form of Pam Bondi to run interference for them. Now, Now, Pam was testifying before the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday for approximately 4 hours, and she took questions on many issues, but exchanges regarding the Epstein Files, of course, were most contentious. And she gave a Jekyll and Hyde style performance, rather, acting deferential and professional with her Republican questioners while attacking Democrats using a large binder of opposition research. Included in that binder, by the way, were printouts of the lawmakers' search histories from their Monday visit to the DOJ, where they viewed the unredacted files. Now, during this testimony, at least 11 Epstein survivors were in attendance, and Washington Representative Pramila Jayapal asked them to raise their hands if they had not yet been questioned by Trump's DOJ. They all did. Bondi refused to acknowledge them, this despite having earlier this same day pledging to investigate any accusations of abuse. Now, Bondi also compulsively praised Trump, dodged tough questions by touting the record high stock market and claiming Trump is the best president ever. Ross, listen, we don't need to address this abuse potentially by the president of the United States, and certainly by people he ran in social circles with it. The Dow's at 50,000.
It's a good answer for anything. I didn't take the garbage out last night, but the Dow is at 50,000. I've got that one ready all day. Look, I think part of the problem we have with this administration, even more so than the first Trump administration, is it is filled with morons. Not simply hey, look, we're arch conservatives and we believe in libertarian paradise or whatever nonsense. These people are stupid. So when you have power, you have ideology, and you have stupidity, it's a terrible combination. So Bondi is in no way qualified to be Attorney General. In the same way that Todd Rokita is in no way qualified to be an Attorney General. In the same way that Robert Kennedy is in no way qualified to run Health and Human Services. Again and again and again, we see these people who not only are incompetent, they are corrupt, but at the end of the day, they're also stupid. And that's the most disturbing part, because people who are not smart can be manipulated. People who are not smart generally have no self-awareness. Obviously, she has none. To be able to put yourself out there and say, to be mocked and be more than willing to do it. That's the most disturbing part about someone like her, is that she is totally unqualified, doesn't know what she's doing. Look, I've been fighting with the Department of Justice for 30 years. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I've seen the government do a lot of things that I didn't like. I've seen a lot of overreach in the federal justice system over the years. But what I haven't seen is incompetence. What I haven't seen is ideology taking over. Now, look, I've seen some perjury in my day. I've seen some cutting corners. I've seen the end justifies the means, but I certainly haven't seen utter incompetence or a lack of understanding. I mean, what kind of world are we in where the United States Department of Justice can't get an indictment? How incompetent do you have to be that you can't get an indictment? And we've seen that many times so far, where they bring somebody in and say, hey, we need you to indict this person. For people that don't know, that's basically the government coming in, setting a jury down and saying, this is our case, without any cross-examination, without any counter. It's like, hey, this is what happened. Trust us. Now go indict that person. Guess what? 99% of the time they do. Unless you are really, really bad at your job, and in which case the jury looks and shrugs their shoulders. What the hell are you talking about? We're not doing this. So the incompetence of it is just ridiculous. I mean, she put herself on full display as a moron, and unfortunately, she's a moron with power. And at least thus far, she's doing a bang-up job of protecting pedophiles.
Well, see, now there you go. I was going to say, no, she might not be very bright, and she might not be very good at doing the job of attorney general, but Chelsea, she's good at her job, which is protecting Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And I think Ross brought up a really good point that a lot of times you see these stupid people are very easily manipulated. So, they just sometimes have to hear what they want to hear. And it's like, okay, my mission is righteous. And they don't question, they just follow. And I sometimes you want to be like, God, are they just so smart that they're just tricking us all? But no, Ross, they're not. They are wholly incapable. And it's just, they each have just this one mission, it seems like. And that one mission is protecting Donald Trump at all costs. What does he have on them?
Are some of these folks implicated too? We don't know. I mean, I've seen pictures of Bondi herself with Trump and Epstein going back a couple decades. What was she up to? We don't know. But yeah, for her incompetence as the attorney general, as a prosecutor, she's very good at filibustering and being an attack dog, and that's what her real job is in this administration. So, one of the things that came up, and I in the show notes, by the way, subscribe to these over at progressiveindiana.net. Even if you don't watch the show, pretty thorough recap of the week in the news with lots of links. So, Democracy Docket pointed out, quote, throughout this hearing with Bondi, Democrats largely failed to ask the Attorney General about the DOJ's recent prominent attacks on voting rights. Most notably, the FBI's unprecedented raid on a Fulton County election facility in late January. Now, about that raid, we spoke each of the last 2 weeks about this. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was there in Atlanta, and her connection to this case has something to do with like the Venezuela changing votes conspiracy. There's like an international element. It's bonkers. This is the stuff that Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell were pushing in court in 2020. Well, Tulsi was back in the news this week for other reasons. There was an intelligence dispute, and Gabbard apparently personally throttled a whistleblower's report concerning an intercepted communication between two foreign nationals last year that concerned President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Now, the law demands that such complaints be delivered to Congress within weeks, but the underlying intelligence report has yet to be sent to Capitol Hill. A heavily redacted copy was provided by Gabbard's office, but that was only last week. But whatever revelations come from that intercept, we all already know the entire Trump family is engaged in corrupt foreign entanglements. The real story with Gabbard is the election subversion. And along those lines, this week, the House passed an election overhaul bill called the Save America Act. Now, this is from Political Quote. The legislation would trigger major changes to how Americans vote, including requiring voters to present proof of citizenship to register, eliminating mail-only registrations, and requiring photo ID in every state for the first time. It would also require states to take new steps to remove non-citizens from existing voter rolls. Now, in the House, one Democrat, Henry Cuellar of Texas, who had been indicted on corruption charges but pardoned by Trump, voted for the bill. And in the Senate, too, only one Democrat, John Fetterman, has voiced support for the bill. It appears, thankfully, that this bill is unlikely to pass the upper chamber, as Majority Leader John Thune has ruled out changes to the filibuster rule to push it through. But that doesn't matter to the president. Trump threatened to issue an executive order, saying in a Truth Social post, quote, "There will be voter ID for the midterm elections, whether approved by Congress or not." And later in the post, he continued, "Republicans must put this at the top of every speech. It is a can't miss for re-election in the midterms and beyond. Even Democrat voters agree, 85%, that there should be voter ID." Now, Ross, why do you think he's right on this, by the way? Pains me to say that. Why do you think Democratic voters might support this?
I think that we've had this pervasive drumbeat of BS about voter fraud for a long, long, long time. Republicans, it's bad politics to come out and say we don't want minorities and poor people to vote. That's bad politics. But it's good politics to say, oh my God, there's rampant cheating. So when people just take that for granted, if you use some logic, the amount, and look, occasionally someone will vote by mistake. Occasionally, someone will get an absentee ballot for their dead wife and send it in. These kind of things do happen. But the idea that we've ever had any kind of voter fraud that would impact an election is ludicrous. It's always been ludicrous. The reason we don't need voter ID is because the odds of someone waking up and saying, aha, I'm going to go trick everybody and go vote. Yeah, they might, but number one, they probably won't. Number two, in the big scheme of things, who cares? It's one vote if we're talking about national elections or statewide elections. But I think a lot of people have this in their head because they've been told this lie that, oh my God, people are voting in droves, illegal, voting, undocumented people are voting, so yeah, I think if you just ask somebody, well, shouldn't people, well, yeah, we don't want people to cheat. So I think that's why the knee-jerk reaction is, well, that seems fair. But what they don't understand is not everybody is in the position that they are in to say, well, I can easily prove my ID. I've got a driver's license. I've got a passport. I've got a whatever. A lot of people don't. And that's the point, right? That's the point, is we want to make it harder to vote, particularly for marginalized people, because the last thing we want are working class people or people who are struggling to vote. And that's the bottom line of all of it.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned like the occasional case of voter fraud. There are numbers on these. There are very good studies. I think there are something like a whopping 3 cases in Indiana last time around. And like you said, in theory, voter ID sounds like it's not a big hurdle. Now, in practice, friend of the pod, Jess Piper, out in Missouri, wrote on Substack a great explanation of how this really works. So the SAVE Act would require a passport or a real ID. Real ID is the one that you need to fly. Well, okay. Half of Americans don't have a passport, one. Number two, passports cost $165 and take, many weeks, sometimes months to get. Real ID requires a birth certificate, which can require time and money to acquire. It also requires multiple proofs of residence, like, physical printed out bills, which many people don't have because, we pay online for most anything anymore. It requires a physical social security card. A lot of people don't have those. They're issued when you're born. People lose them. You have to go to the SSA office. And again, God knows, it takes time. It takes trips. It takes money and resources to do these things. You have to go to the DMV to get this real ID, perhaps multiple trips. If you forget like one piece of documentation, you have to go back and do it again. This is hours of your time. If you're a working person, you might not be able to afford to give up hours of your time during the hours the DMV is open. And here's the real kicker. For people who have changed their name, that is, most married women in this country, you also have to provide proof of name changes, which, again, also incurs charges many times for document fees. It requires a wait while these things are fulfilled. My God, if you've been divorced and remarried and changed your name multiple times, multiply that out. Chelsea, this seems like it's directed at women in particular. They don't want women to vote. Now, some of your far-right folks in the podcast sphere will actually say this thing. Peter Thiel, I believe, has said like one of the worst things that ever happened was the 19th Amendment granting the women the right to vote. Well, like Ross was saying, it's unpopular to say certain things out loud, you have to do them through procedural tricks like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we've known this. We've known that the odds have always been stacked against us because we also know that they know the power lies with women. You can look back through American history all the way back to the beginning, and if women were able to step up, right? And let's talk about when we owned slaves, right? The women weren't treated well either. If women would have just gone to the slaves and said, this isn't what we deserve better, let's rise. I know that we're thinking about it as like this systemic thing where, oh, well, the white men would come after us. There were a lot more of us than there were of them. So, women, we've always had the power. And that is absolutely terrifying to the powers that be, because if we stand up, if we really come together, it's over for them. It is. And I feel that very, very deeply within myself. And I am encouraging it every step of the way. I am a girl's girl. Don't put baby in the corner.
Well, you really get it. It's the oldest trick in the book. Right? It's divide and conquer, right? The wealthy, the powerful, the oligarchs. They like to keep marginalized communities, be it people of color, be it women, be it queer folks, whoever, keep them fighting with each other so they don't join forces and take on the real powers. Now, some of the most powerful folks in this country are the oil and gas industry, and they got themselves a lovely present this week. Let's talk about this. So, didn't get a chance to mention this a couple weeks ago. Have you guys met Coley? Isn't he cute? Interior Secretary Doug Burgum introduced this fellow, the mascot for the American Energy Dominance Agenda, in a post on X in late January. Well, there is nothing cute about Thursday's landmark repeal of the Obama-era endangerment finding by the Environmental Protection Administration, which has served as the legal basis for greenhouse gas regulations since 2009, which, my God, I'm going to realize how old I am. Now, that's almost 20 years ago now. From USA Today, quote, the finding stated that current and projected concentrations of 6 key greenhouse gases in the atmosphere threaten the public health and welfare of current and future generations. A related EPA finding signed in tandem singled out new motor vehicles and engines as contributors to greenhouse gas pollution. So, listen, you can repeal this all you want. It doesn't make it untrue. This is still happening. Now, Trump has called climate change a hoax and a con job and pulled the U.S. from international climate obligations. Rescinding this finding would render the EPA unable to regulate emissions under the Clean Air Act. Actual environmental scientists highlight carbon dioxide and methane gases as threats to public health. Groups like Climate Power, Sierra Club, and the notorious political activists, the American Lung Association, have come out against the repeal, while the fossil fuel, energy, and freight and transport industries are in favor. Now, according to The Guardian, the final rule removes the government's ability to impose requirements to track, report, and limit climate heating pollution from cars and trucks. Transportation is the largest source of climate pollution in the U.S. Again, just because you don't count it doesn't mean it's not there. Now, this regulation does not apply to regulations on stationary sources of emissions, such as power plants and fossil fuel infrastructure, which are regulated under a separate section of the Clean Air Act. But this will open the door to end those standards, too. In fact, Trump's EPA has already proposed rules to do just that. Even the American Petroleum Institute said that this is a bridge too far. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin said the move will save the U.S. $1.3 trillion, but an analysis from the Environmental Defense Fund found that it would impose up to $4.7 trillion in expenses in the long run. Ross, it just seems like a case of kicking the can down the road for short-term gain for the people who have supported this president and his agenda financially.
Yeah, the first thing I thought of when I saw the, we want to end the counting and the reporting requirements, it reminded me of Trump during the height of COVID, when he came out and said, the problem is we're doing too many tests. If we stop testing for COVID, we'd have fewer cases. It's the same kind of mentality. It's like, hey, if we stop counting the emissions, then who can talk about emissions? But look, the billionaire class, the industrial class has done a masterful job over the years of convincing working class people that being for the environment makes you gay. And so you've got tons of people, or makes you weak. I mean, look, it makes you something less than a man to be for the environment. It has been, you have people who have nothing to gain from polluting the environment, who have been convinced very easily that, well, you're of course not for these environmental regulations because you're a real man. You're not some wimp. And so they've made the politics of it about something other than the environment. And that's why you get so many MAGA type Republicans who are more than happy to do the bidding for polluters when they have nothing to do with it. So it's credit where credit is due when you talk about manipulating people, but there's very few things that people have been manipulated on as much as the environment, because they've been convinced that, you're being tricked, or these are global elites who are tricking you. The windmills cause cancer, and solar power
like the birds and the whales. Yeah.
So, part of the problem is, this culture, how you've gotten environmentalism into the culture wars, is a real part of the problem. But I mean, these things are just, blatant. And that's the difference between the first Trump administration and the second Trump administration. The second Trump administration, they tried to do all these things through, I guess, normal politics. And now it's just like, yep, we're doing it. Whatever we want to do, we're doing it. Try to stop us. And you see it. So we are going to stop it. But for now, they are taking as much advantage of their power, not based on any kind of science. It's just somebody wants to make a buck. Some sociopath who runs a industrial business. All he cares about is his next quarter. He doesn't care about. He doesn't care about his workers. He doesn't care about his country. He doesn't care about the water that people have to drink. All he cares about is next quarter. And if he wasn't a psychopath, he probably would never have become a CEO.
Lot there, Ross, but you hit at the fundamental flaw of neoliberal capitalism, and that it's only focused on the next quarterly report. Did we make profit? Can I take this to shareholders and say I deserve a big bonus this quarter? Meanwhile, they're stealing our future from us. And like you mentioned these global elites, right? They like to blame the global elites for pushing this environmental agenda. Who, Chelsea, is more of a global elite than the oil and gas industry? They run the entire damn thing. They've run the entire Republican Party in this country for generations, and they've got some of their tentacles into the Democratic Party as well. Then you look at a place like Russia, which is basically entirely propped up by their extractive industries. That's where all of their money comes from. And then you look at the Gulf states and some of Trump's corrupt buddies in the Emirates and the Saudis. And hello, these are the global elites.
Yeah, and apparently we want to be just like Russia, right? Now, I want to kind of come at this from the activist standpoint. you know, it's like they kind of flip the script a little bit on us. Instead of them being the elites, it's the kids, right? Well, they're just being elitist, and you know that the environment, it's fine, and these kids don't know what they're talking about, and the kids know what they're talking about. Like, they're not stupid, and they're listening to shows like this. This is what they're watching right now. They want to know the truth. They want to know the dirty. They want to get down to the nitty gritty, and they're being treated like they're the elites, like they're the ones who are causing the problems. They're the ones who are being too loud, and they're not. And we need to get behind them because we have been trying for years, right? And I mean, look, we've failed. We've failed. We have made some really good steps in the right direction, but we're not getting anywhere. We have to bring the young people into this with us if we're going to make any progress. And when we're talking about the both sides, right? Republicans and Democrats, we have those people in each party. And I know here in Indiana, we're seeing it very, very clearly playing out in front of us right now. This attempt to keep new voices, young voices, angry voices, you know, and these kids aren't angry and destroying stuff. They're angry and they're coming forward and they're speaking. It's time to listen to them because they see it for what it is. And if we bring them, if we hold their hands for just long enough for them to feel comfortable leading, we are going to make incredible progress when it comes to our environment. I mean, these kids are still chaining themselves to doors and laying across roads and refusing to move. Support them. So go lay on the ground with them, for goodness sake. You know what I mean? It's time. It really is. I don't want to be like Russia. I want to be like these kids.
Oh, but listen, the kids love Coley. Isn't he cute? But what, going back to what Ross said, it's a good point. This is a hell of a trick that this industry has perpetuated, convincing folks that oligarchs and sheikhs and emirates and crown princes are somehow not the global elites ruling the world, but like adjunct professors making $40,000 a year are. It's insane. And I don't know how you push back against that, again, because these folks have all of the money in the world to engage in these propaganda campaigns. They've been doing it since for decades now. I mean, like, if you go back to the 1980s and Rush Limbaugh and that whole genre of like right-wing hate radio, it was all propped up by the extractive industries. And here we are today with all the evidence in the world pointing to the actual real-time effects of climate change. It's not this future thing. When you, like, you know, I think we're all relatively close in age. We grew up in the 80s and 90s acknowledging climate change. George H.W. Bush acknowledged climate change, and he was a Texas oil man. And now, then it was like this future far off thing, right? Oh man, we better get to acting on it now. Now, here we are 40 years later, and we're seeing the effects in real time. We're seeing the storms. We're seeing the heat waves. We're seeing, what the hell is a bomb cyclone? We didn't have bomb cyclones and atmospheric rivers when we were kids. And still, to be able to say that it's a hoax and a con job now when we're seeing the effects outside of our windows, you know, like, brilliantly evil, well executed plan. You know, I think with a tenth of their resources, we could do amazing things. But we spend our money on things like deporting immigrants, whether they deserve it or not. So let's talk about ICE. This has been our top story the last several weeks. I put it here because it's going to make a nice transition into our next section. So this week on Monday, a California federal judge blocked a mask ban from going into effect because it did not also apply to state law enforcement, thus discriminating against the feds. See, last September, the state of California passed a law that would ban federal law enforcement agents from wearing face coverings, as well as one that would mandated they display clear identification. Now, at least the law requiring ID was upheld. We also saw statistics this week, and this is from CBS, of the nearly 400,000 immigrants arrested by ICE since the beginning of Trump's second term. And by the way, that's a big ass number just there by itself. Of that 400,000, less than 14% had charges or convictions for violent offenses. And that is according to an internal DHS memo. So much for the worst of the worst, right? Now, nearly 60% of those arrested had some charges, but the vast majority of those were for non-violent crimes. And furthermore, so you're telling me 40% had zero criminal record? I that should be the headline of this article, I think. Now, with statistics like that, it's easy to see why a wide majority of Americans support, at the very least, reforms to immigrations and customs enforcement. Now, a new NBC News poll released this week found 43% of U.S. adults think ICE should be reformed, while 29% say it should be abolished outright, and equal 29% say it should continue as is. Among other interesting findings in this survey, a majority of Americans, including 41% of Republicans, support a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, and 87% of Americans, it's hard to get that many people to agree on anything, but 87% of Americans believe federal agents should not be granted immunity for unlawful activity on the line of duty. Unlawful activity, like what they did to this poor Venezuelan man in Minnesota last month. And it appears two ICE officers lied about an incident in Minneapolis where one of them shot a Venezuelan immigrant in the leg. This is according to ICE Director Todd Lyons. Now, the agents have been placed on administrative leave and are under investigation by the DOJ, but this is Pam Bondi's DOJ, right? We were just talking about her. Do you trust them to conduct a fair, impartial investigation? But, at least there's movement, it appears. They're admitting that there is something wrong. And along those lines, Border Czar Tom Homan announced on Thursday that the administration will end Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota. A little less than 2 weeks ago, Homan had announced a 30% reduction in forces in the state. But now he says increased cooperation between federal, state, and local law enforcement means the massive number of agents is no longer necessary. Now, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz says nothing has actually changed about the way the state has addressed immigration enforcement, but the replacement of Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino with Homan, who was more willing to engage in talks, has led to these recent developments. So, what is this? Is this a new, gentler, more accountable ICE? And if so, does Democratic hardball over government funding deserve some of the credit? To that effect, DHS funding expired on Saturday, and Democrats say they will not approve more money until reforms are made. The resulting partial government shutdown is limited only to agencies under the Homeland Security umbrella. That's ICE, CBP, and TSA, but the very immigration and deportation work that has drawn the scrutiny and the pushback will continue because last year's one big bullshit bill act bestowed ICE and Border Patrol with tens of billions of dollars each, which they can draw upon in the meantime. So I guess given that, have these congressional Democrats actually accomplished anything? And I guess, Ross, I'll start there with you with that question. Is this shutdown of DHS, is the withholding funding worth a damn if they get to keep on going out and doing their thing?
Well, I guess the first question is, if past is prologue, it will end in compromise. Unfortunately, I think we've seen again and again and again, our national leadership has not had the fortitude to stand up when it counts. They have listened to consultants instead of their constituents, and consultants, notably, risk-averse cowards that they are, will tell politicians, "Oh my God, you're going to get blamed for bad things that happen if you stand up." When we know that the reality is that's what people are begging for. They are begging for our guys and gals to stand up and say no more. But until it happens, it hasn't happened. So I would hope, number one, that they actually follow through. It will be yet another disappointment if they don't. But I'm not betting my house on it. That's for sure. But sure, look, part of the problem for me with all of this is we have gladly given a blank check to the military. We've given a blank check to law enforcement. Since 9/11, we've created, the Homeland Security, which has militarized border patrol, it's militarized immigration services, it's militarized the damn TSA at the airport. And we have gladly said, here's the checkbook, whatever you want, because we are patriotic Americans. And guess what? Then the chickens come home to roost, because when a bunch of fascists get in charge of these agencies, you've given them a blank check and you've given them broad immunity, and then you are shocked to find there's gambling at Rick's. So, look, I think the mask issue is a perfect example. California is like, hey, these guys shouldn't be able to wear masks. Now, our cops, that's a whole different story. Our cops should be able to. Our cops should be able to wear masks and do whatever they want and bash down your door with a tank. But these guys, I mean, come on. That's part of the problem. People talking about, oh my God, these ICE agents shot a person in cold blood. Law enforcement is shooting people in cold blood for a long time, with very little consequence. Very little consequence. You talk about, do we trust Pam Bondi to investigate these agents? I don't trust most prosecutors in this country to adequately prosecute police misconduct, much less Pam Bondi. So it is a much more systemic problem for me. I get a little worked up about it. This is where I live as a criminal defense attorney. We have to understand that, things have consequences. When we say the police should have more power, and then the police use that power, it shouldn't matter who it's against. We should recognize that danger. So, look, I think it is good that people have said ICE has gone too far, but I certainly wish people would say the police state has gone too far in many, many occasions in the past. And I'd like to see broad reform, not simply ICE reform. I'd like to see Homeland Security disbanded. I mean, these used to be separate, independent agencies, and now we have one giant bureaucracy that can be abused. I'd like to see reform across the board.
Ross is cooking with gas on a Sunday morning. I love it. But let me do the uncomfortable thing and play devil's advocate here for a second. Chelsea, I'm going to point to that NBC poll. So, 29% of us are out here like, yeah, abolish ICE, and an equal 29% are like, nah, let her rip. That 43% in the middle that wants reform, what does that look like? What is this reform we speak of? What is sufficient reform to you?
Well, first of all, let me say that I don't think anybody actually knows what that would look like. I don't think a lot of people even understand what reform even means when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I am personally a fan of abolishing ICE. I am within that 29%. And I haven't liked ICE for a very long time. So let's get that out of the way, because people love bringing Barack into it. And, he did this stuff. Okay, yeah, I was against it then as well. I didn't have to worry about ICE agents coming and pulling my Hispanic family members out of their homes. I didn't necessarily have to worry about that so much. Now, was it happening? Absolutely. It was happening. It was happening very quietly. It was happening right underneath our noses, and we had no idea, but we also weren't paying attention. We are very, very comfortable with our lives. Even though we feel very uncomfortable right now, we are still very comfortable. And as long as it's not affecting us, most people aren't going to actually step up and speak out. Now, to actually reform these things, in my opinion, it has to be broken all the way down and built back up. You can't. The police state that we are in now is so far gone that it can't even include, in my opinion, the same people who have been in it. We need whole new system. We need whole new ideas, whole new people who have not been trained to think in this way, in this overreach police state. This is where their minds are. We can't be in that mindset anymore. So, I mean, it has to be completely torn down and rebuilt. And, when we talk about these pathways to getting into our country, that seems like it should be a pretty simple process, right? I mean, if we're communicating with other countries and we have a relationship with these places, wouldn't that be a really great first step in communicating with each other and making sure that we're not just trading bad people? You know what I mean? Like, if it's a terrorist, let's communicate about this. Let's make sure that we're not bringing terrorists into our country. There's a way to go about all of this, and it starts from the bottom up. And I wish that I had more. I wish that I could tell you more about what that would look like, but I don't. I don't know what that would look like except just tearing it all down.
Yeah, well, I mean, this entire Department of Homeland Security, like Ross says, this came after 9/11. It's relatively new in the grand scheme of things. For all of Republicans like to rail against the Department of Education because it was created in 1979, right? They're like, oh, we existed perfectly fine before this. Well, okay, well, what about DHS? That is even newer, right? It is even less necessary. In fact, it's completely unnecessary. Department of Education, that's a thing we need. But I want to go back to Mr. Homan, and like you said, Chelsea, he was around during the Obama administration. He was the not border czar, but he was like the immigration enforcer guy then. Obama praised him for the work he had done, and like you said, folks like us over here on the left, we pointed that out at the time because we're not in a cult. But back to Minnesota and Homan. So, he says they're pulling these ICE agents out. That was about 700. They started drawing down a couple weeks ago. Now he says they're not all going to leave, right? I mean, there's still going to be a presence somewhere. That's what they do. But some of them may be headed this way, and that's why that's where I want to start as we turn the corner here at the top of the hour in a segment I like to call the Crossroads. This is where Indiana news intersects with the U.S. and international stories. Now, this was a big story this week. So, apparently ICE informed Carmel police that the agency is establishing office space in the city just north of the county line and border with Indianapolis at the Penn on Parkway business complex. I didn't know that was the border they're protecting. Apparently, elected officials in the city were not notified ahead of time. Now, the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office was the first in the state to line up an agreement with ICE last year. They are also, in addition to setting up office space in Carmel, eyeballing unused warehouse locations in Northwest Indiana to potentially convert into detention centers. And Ross, I want to get your thoughts on ICE in Indiana.
Well, I think what you'll see in Indiana is probably a different kind of enforcement. I think one of the things in places like Chicago and in places like Minneapolis, most of it was a show of force, a theatrical show of force, much more than a tactical use of resources. I doubt that we will see that here because it would reflect badly on local politicians, most all of whom are Republicans. So I would be surprised if we saw them use the same tactics here. But the fact that we have this militarized ICE group as the apparatus to deal with undocumented persons, I think wherever they are, it's ineffective and obviously dangerous. I just going back to what Chelsea was talking about, when the Obama administration really ramped up deportations, it was all administrative. And, I was one of those people that thought unnecessary. Republicans have been huge fans over the years of a guest worker program, particularly in California, which is basically we don't want you to live here, but we would love to exploit you at least during growing season. So please, you're more than welcome to come up here and be exploited. Every meat packer in Nebraska pays minimum wage to undocumented people, and they have for decades, in some of the most dangerous jobs in the world with big saws but look, we'd much rather pay less for meat and not think about who's working in there under horrible conditions, who doesn't dare say a word when their finger gets chopped off because they know that they're under someone's thumb. So look, I don't begrudge anybody for working. I don't begrudge anybody for coming to this country to work. But if we really, really wanted to address, a problem, to me, the only problem is exploiting people and driving down wages by taking advantage of people who are looking to better themselves. If we actually enforce those laws, if we actually said, listen, if you get caught hiring someone for less than minimum wage who's undocumented, you're going to prison for 10 years. Guess what? I bet, and we actually enforce that. I tend to think that we would see some reform in the meatpacking industry and those other things. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I guess Carmel is going to be safe now that the ICE is here. But it'll be interesting to see how they act in our state. As far as like the, building more prisons and, the Speedway slammer or all that, it's about making a buck. It's always about making a buck with Indiana Republicans. So if they can interact with ICE and make some money for their guys, they're going to do it. They just see it as a gravy train because that's how they see everything.
Yeah, well, to that effect, Ross, I mean, this week we also saw that the state received its first monthly payments for housing these ICE detainees at the Miami Correctional Facility, which, as you mentioned, the Trump administration has branded as the Speedway Slammer, even though it's nowhere near the Speedway. Come on, guys, get it right. Now, this payment is for October and was delayed due to the government shutdown last fall, and like you said, State Budget Committee approved $16 million for upgrades to the facility that is expected to recoup this from the high per diem rate from the federal government, about 4 times what it costs to hold these men. And also, as what you were speaking about with, the jobs that these immigrants do, Indiana, one of our U.S. senators, the more overtly fascistic one, Jim Banks, launched a tip line for truckers to snitch on immigrant drivers. It's called the Truck Safe Tip Line, and was begun after an immigrant from Kyrgyzstan was arrested after his truck caused 4 fatalities in a crash earlier this month. Now, mind you, the man came to the U.S. legally using the CBP-1 app and had a commercial driver's license. The administration has latched onto rare incidents like this to portray all immigrant drivers as a threat. This tip line is specifically for truckers and others in the industry who snitch on drivers they suspect for whatever reason, because truckers are notoriously also moonlighting as immigration attorneys. And apparently my mic is crackling, so I'm going to ask Chelsea to speak on this while I unplug and plug back in. Chelsea, go ahead.
Okay, so I was trying to pick up everything you were putting down. It was breaking up just a little bit for me, but I want to say, so ICE in Indiana, first of all, Carmel, we actually have a lot of immigrants there who are working in like the medical field, law. These are people who came here, went to college, and got very, very high-end jobs that we really need in Indiana. So that right there, I'm kind of like that. What a weird dichotomy there. And then also, I think that they're making a huge mistake. I think that they think because Indiana has been so deep red for so long that people here are just going to be accepting of this. And we're just going to say, okay, yeah, it makes sense for us. And it doesn't. I think especially the young people, as they're setting up in our state, I think that they're going to show up. I think that there will be protests. I think that we will continue hearing people speak up at the state house. I don't think that this is going to go smoothly for them. And I'm really hoping that that is the case. I would like every single day to be miserable for them personally. And I think Ross brought up a really good point. Now, see, it's hard for me because I don't believe that our justice system and our police and things like that, I don't think that they're doing the job that they were meant to do. I don't think that it's working. And so, when I talk about putting people into jail or to prison, I don't take that lightly. But Ross makes a really, really good point about these people have to have consequences. And sometimes those consequences might be making you miserable day in and day out. And if that's what we need to do because our justice system cannot figure out how to get justice for people, then it's up to the people. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people step up. They are not using businesses anymore. See, I am always the person, if I find out somebody around here owns a business and they are hateful, I put it out there. And I hope that they lose business. I truly do. I hope that you're losing business right now. And I hope that it makes you very, very sad and upset. I also hope that you're stubbing your toe daily. I think that they're making a big mistake. I think people in Indiana are waking up, and I think that we are taking steps in the right direction. And I don't think that we're going to stop. Maybe there aren't as many of us here as maybe you were seeing in Minnesota and places like that, but give it time. We're coming. We are. And as long as the people who are listening to this right now, you have to make space for people. You have to bring people in. You have to allow them to speak and get things off of their chest. And they're not always going to be right. They're very new to this sometimes, and they need patience. And we have to bring them with us when we fight. So yeah, big mistake on ICE's part.
Yeah. Do I sound all right now? Did we get the mic issue fixed? All right, great. Thank you. So I want to stay on the crossroads here. It's not just ICE where Indiana and national news are intersecting. So out in California this week, a trial began. Meta and YouTube are being sued on claims their products are addictive and harmful to children. The trial began this week in Los Angeles. Now, jurors were presented with internal documents appearing to show the companies knew of the adverse effects Instagram and YouTube particularly had on already vulnerable kids. A separate trial in New Mexico also began on Monday, alleging Meta failed to protect users from sexual exploitation. Additionally, school districts are suing social media platforms in a trial expected to begin in Oakland in June, while TikTok faces lawsuits in more than a dozen states. Well, in Indiana this week, The House advanced a couple of bills on Wednesday, one requiring student cell phones be powered off and locked up for the entire duration of the school day, and another which would place restrictions on minors' social media accounts. Now, both of these bills originated in the Senate, the first passing narrowly with concerns about how it could be implemented. It did pass out of the House committee on a 12-0 vote. The second bill, SB 199, is a larger education package. The social media provision had earlier been removed due to constitutional and enforcement concerns, but were reinserted in the wake of the apparent murder of a Fisher's teen by a man she met online. This bill would require social media companies to implement new standards for minors' accounts and mandate parents be granted access upon request. This bill cleared committee on a party line vote, with Democrats opposed, citing First Amendment and privacy concerns. Other provisions in the bill would eliminate certain college degree programs based on earning potential, but that's kind of not what our purview is in this discussion. Ross, listen, social media has a lot of problems with, especially for children, and I think these trials and discovery and whatnot out in California are going to show that. But on the other hand, there are these privacy and constitutional concerns, and one of the things that folks, particularly in the LGBTQ community, tell me is that social media, for them, particularly if they grew up in unfriendly households, was a lifeline into the real world. So I guess, how do you juggle those things?
Well, I think you just throw out the Constitution. All right, that seems like the simplest thing to do. That seems to be, the go-to move for Republicans. If the Constitution gets in the way, you just throw out the Constitution. But seriously, yeah. Look, anytime there's a tragedy, there's always a reaction. Say, oh, we've got to pass a law, we've got to change a law to address a particular problem, and it almost never works. It always, unforeseen consequences to create more problems than they solve. I actually think these lawsuits potentially have some value in that, whether it's Meta or Google or whomever. Look, if you're going to regulate yourself, it's going to be because it's costing you money, not because of really anything else. So I think potentially these can have some value. I don't know the merit of them. I haven't looked at them, but it raises questions. It reminds you of, right, the cigarette companies, right? It's like, we knew for years that cigarettes cause cancer, but yet we came out and said, no, they don't. And ultimately they paid the price for that. And that came from litigation. So I think that's a good thing. But look, you do, anytime you start talking about the government, just like with the cell phones, the state government, they talk a great game about local control, but whenever anything comes along where you have a choice between local control and their long arm of the Republican law, they choose themselves. I mean, I don't see a school district in this state that cannot figure out what works best for them in terms of cell phones at all. And why you would need a blanket rule. The only reason is because, look, we have power. We think there's some political capital to be gained to say, hey, kids today, they're whatever Republicans talk about, and they want to gain some political power from that. But look, realistically, we ought to leave that to every school district, maybe even every classroom. I don't know. That's up to the principal. That's up to the superintendent. But that's ridiculous. And then when you look at, we're going to regulate speech. We've got to regulate speech because of some problem. Well, most of the time we don't. Most of the time we're better off having free speech. Yes, look, there are things that can be done to protect people more. educate people more, have parents understand how they can monitor their kids' access to social media. Maybe, maybe they don't, because they don't know how. But I'd much rather teach them how to do it than have the government say, we're going to come in and we're going to look at what you're looking at and we're going to regulate what you can say and we're going to, um, and ultimately end up with a thing like Pam Bondi, where she says, "Hey, I'm coming in. I know what's in your search engine, and I'm going to hold that against you." So we don't want to live in a world like that. They do, but we don't. So yeah, I would hope it doesn't pass, and if it does pass, that it's struck down as unconstitutional.
Can I actually hop in here when you're?
Yeah.
I
want to.
Very strong opinions about this. And I want to start out by saying Ross brought up a point. He said, we have a reaction, right? When something happens, we want to do something about it, except when it comes to guns. I mean, we have school shootings constantly and no one's reacting strongly to that anymore, it seems, So I wanted to bring up that. But when we're talking about this kind of legislation, because I pay very close attention to the state legislation, I have children who live here. We cannot continue to legislate this type of stuff. This is government overreach by far. This is a systemic issue. Parents are constantly bombarded with the need to pay for things. Bills are going up. Jobs are horrifying right now. I mean, you have no job security whatsoever in this state. Our unions are completely useless because of the legislation. It is a systemic issue where we have got to give people some goddamn relief if they're going to be able to pay attention to what the hell is going on with these kids. I'm a parent myself. It is really difficult. And, I am lucky to be a little bit more educated than maybe some of these other parents. And I'm able to have these conversations with my kids and talk to them about the dangers. And a lot of times they don't want to talk to me. They're like, ew, mom, gross. I don't care. Sit your ass down. We're going to have this conversation. And if I feel like I need to look at your phone, well, God damn it, I pay for it. I'm going to look at the damn phone. As parents, we have got to step up. We are not the government. We are not limiting our children's First Amendment rights by taking their cell phones away from them. Like, that is not how this works. So, I have very, very strong opinions about that. I think it's absolutely wild when we are living in a time where I'm more concerned about my child being bullied and beat up and shot by a gun than I'm worried about them having an allergic reaction at school because somebody brought peanuts in. Not allowing them to have access to their phones. I don't want them on it in classroom, but if my child goes on lockdown, I want them to be able to call me and say goodbye. Mom, I think somebody's going to kill me. I want to tell you that I love you. They deserve to have that. And we're not doing anything to protect them. There are so many simple things that we could be doing to protect them better at schools. The legislation shouldn't be focused on taking their goddamn phones away. It should be focused on making sure that there is security at their school and that their doors work and that their alarm systems work and that they know exactly what to do in case this happens. But we're not putting any effort into that because of the systemic issues surrounding every bit of it. We've already got a stranglehold on everybody who can do anything about it, except the government, which is holding the stranglehold.
And this whole thing is a giant can of worms. Like Ross talked about it. Like, these companies know that their products have potential to be addictive and dangerous. One of these articles, compares them to, like Ross said, the tobacco company or the oil companies, and they lie about the things they know internally to the public. And listen, it's not just the kids, right? Like, we've got a whole generation of boomers whose brains have been poisoned by Facebook. And, are we going to ban them too? The problem isn't at the end user so much as the algorithm. It's gamified to keep you addicted. How do we know who is who online? I think that's where we should be focusing, putting the onus on the companies and not on the parents or the kids. Now, along these lines, I want to turn to this staggering hypocrisy from Governor Mike Braun this week. So, about Meta, who was being sued for their deceptive business practices. Well, Governor Mike Braun attended a ceremony in Lebanon on Wednesday where Meta broke ground on a $10 billion, 13-building data center campus where he touted Indiana's, quote, business first environment. So residents second, third, where do we fit? Meta is already in the process of opening an $800 million data center in Jeffersonville. Now, the best part, and Will Coltrion pointed this out on Facebook. Will is running for the State House in District 40 there. I want to say he's in Avon, which is, right there next to this thing. Just hours earlier, Braun had taken to social media, ironically, to complain about big tech putting profit over protection in touting the aforementioned Senate Bill 199 that we were just talking about a minute ago. Now, this is not the only data center struggle going on in the state. I mean, these things are popping up all over the place. Indiana is not necessarily ground zero for data centers, but we're like right there at the top of the list of locations that are being exploited. Now, in Indianapolis, in the Martindale Brightwood neighborhood, on Thursday, a proposed data center from Metro Blocks in the predominantly black neighborhood moved forward after a vote of recommendation by a hearing examiner. This despite more than 100 residents showing up to protest. Now, several city county councilors went on the record asking the LA-based startup company to delay or withdraw their rezoning request. Very last minute, by the way. Where have these guys been the entire time? Though Rob Gibson, the counselor for that area, supports the project, the proposal will be heard by the Metropolitan Development Commission next month. The company has apparently not yet secured an agreement with the local utility, AES, to power the facility, which could use as much electricity as the entire city of Muncie, and as such, is expected to have 36 diesel generators on site. Now, Elon Musk's XAI data center in Memphis, Tennessee, is accused of using a similar setup and pouring pollution into a predominantly black neighborhood there. Ross, I mean, we see what's going on here, right?
It's just the same thing that always goes on here, which is Republicans using the levers of government to make money for people who then give them money to stay in power. So everything, I said it before, I'll say it again, everything, and that's no exaggeration, everything that this state legislature does, that this governor does, at the end of the day, somebody is making a dollar off of it in some way, shape, or form. That is how they operate. That is how they'll always operate. So look, these data centers, I mean, that's easy as can be, right? That's easy as can be. Hey, we got a multi-billion-dollar company, come right on in, and that's why a place like Indiana, as you said, business first. I guess drinking water last. I don't know. I'm no expert certainly on this kind of thing, but one of the things that jumped out to me when they said that there were going to be 300 permanent jobs, I just did a little basic digging. I wasn't able to find a single data center in this country that employs 300 people, or really anywhere close to 300 people. So either this one is magical, or
Ross, this Meta one in Lebanon is like 10 data centers. It's 13 buildings, 10 of which are going to be data centers. So maybe. But again, even if it's 300 jobs, is it worth all of the other
but how
effects
many
from
of
this
those
thing?
jobs? Even so, if the largest data center that we see employs 100 people, that suddenly this one is going to employ triple that, and in those places, most of those jobs are remote. In other words, they are jobs, but they are not jobs in Lebanon. Those are jobs in Santa Clara. So I'm very skeptical. And just like everybody should always be very skeptical of these boondoggle projects. We've seen these again and again and again. Company comes in, makes a big promise, gets a tax break, gets the roads, gets the plumbing, gets everything, and then, oh well, it didn't work out the way we thought it would. Every one of these warehouses, Amazon, that we were promised all of these high-paying jobs. Well, that's before we got this automated system. That's before we made sure we killed organized labor. So, they don't make as much as we thought they were going to make after all. Actually, only have about half the people. So, but look, I agree with you. Even if it's 300 great jobs, I mean, the scale of losing tax base for and spending money to get 300 jobs is not a good payoff in any way, shape, or form. And that doesn't even take into account how much we're going to be paying for electricity, how much we're going to be paying in increased medical costs because we have poisoned water. These are all built-in costs that don't come from that bottom line.
Right. And look, I'm not a Luddite. I used a little bit of AI for certain things. It's great for parsing a transcript, for one of these shows. But, there's ways to go about doing these things, right? You can have a closed loop water system. These things can be sustainable and powered by on-site renewable energy. They can pay their goddamn taxes. Chelsea, Braun gave the game away when he said this business first environment, but I don't know if I've ever seen the hypocrisy laid out so starkly as Mr. Coltrane did on Facebook there.
Well, and I mean, I think that this is something that we've seen from Braun his entire time in politics. He's always talked this big businessman game of, he understands how this is going to help Hoosiers and all this stuff, but Ross just said something and it was the cost for everybody else. And that's exactly it. We're not thinking about the cost to us. We're the ones who are paying the price. We're the ones who are going to end up sick without water and without any representation, which is where we're at now. We're losing that representation. And then once that representation is gone, which is what they're trying to do with every single thing that we talked about in this show, and then once that representation is gone, then so are we. We can't survive. We can't survive when this is what they're doing to us. They're coming and they're taking our resources and they're ignoring the pollution and they're ignoring the fact that they gave jobs to somebody out of state rather than giving jobs to people in this state. If we don't fight back and call them out for these things, I mean, we're literally doomed because they do not care at all about us. I mean, I'm in Muncie. I'm in Delaware County. Madison County is right next door to me. They've been dealing with water issues for a long time. Their water isn't safe. We think about water issues and we're thinking about Detroit. Guess what, you guys? It's happening here in Indiana. And this isn't the only part of Indiana that is dealing with poisoned water. Wake up.
Yeah. And it's because we give the farm away, sometimes literally, to companies like this without getting sufficient tax revenue in return, and that leaves us unable to invest in things like updated water infrastructure. I mean, as the industrial part of the country that put in these things first 100 years ago, well, we're coming due to replace these things, and we've just let everything go to shit because we are giving the farm away to business first, Hoosiers last. Now, we mentioned metro blocks in Indianapolis and the way this thing looks like they're exploiting a predominantly black neighborhood. That's par for the course with these business interests in Indianapolis. It's not just the data centers, it's also the education profiteers. Now, we've talked about this one previously, we've been following this story for a while now. The debate is growing over who should control Indiana's schools. House Bill 1423 is currently moving through the state legislature. This would create a new state-authorized, entirely mayor-appointed entity that would sit above the IPS school board and oversee things like transportation and facilities. Now, the bill author, Bob Benning, says the legislation will not dissolve IPS or its democratically elected school board and is only meant to address access for now. A similar proposal for South Bend schools failed to advance this session. Several years ago, 2017, state lawmakers took over and installed outside managers in Muncie, in Gary, the public schools there, though the state has been slightly less heavy-handed with recent legislation. Though last year, the General Assembly snuck in language to Senate Bill 1, that was the governor's major property tax bill, that would close rural Union School Corporation. That's right next to you there, Chelsea, in Blackford County. Another bill that session sought to outright eliminate Gary Public Schools as well as several small rural districts. Thankfully, it did not advance. Now, folks in Indianapolis in the charter school industry, nonprofits like the Mind Trust and Stand for Children, argue that black parents support this takeover and that opposition is only coming from white liberals. Well, on Wednesday, the African American Coalition of Indianapolis called bullshit, saying, quote, African Americans are not a monolith, but claims made by organizations and institutions with little or no authentic connection to the black community do not reflect the public record and are deeply concerning. End quote. For the record, both the Mind Trust and Stand for Children are led by white men. Greater Indianapolis NAACP and the Concerned Clergy of Indianapolis also oppose House Bill 1423. Disclaimer, Progressive Indiana Network carries the Concerned Clergy podcast. Now, Ross, again, same story, huh? Exploiting marginalized communities, making a buck.
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And you might find parents who have bought what they're selling, because they've been lied to again and again and again about the efficiency and the power and the greatness of charter schools, that if only we could have a charter school, you would have a much better outcome, which it's never happened anywhere. That's a lie, but it's a lie that if you've been told enough times, you might say, yeah, our school isn't great. So, give me behind what's behind door number 2. The great charter school is going to save the day. So it doesn't surprise me that there are parents out there that, oh, well, if this is going to make a better school, we want to do it. But the reality is it's a lie. They're not better schools. They're just more profitable schools for people who are making money. I sound like a broken record, right? Everything that they do is about somebody making a buck. And that's partly because we don't have any campaign finance rules in this state. You can give unlimited money to state candidates, myself included, by the way. You can give unlimited money. And so what happens? The charter school industry, the private school voucher industry is all about taking your money and giving it to someone else to make money off of what should not be a money-making operation, which is educating our children. It is a scam. It is a boondoggle. Using these sort of that's what it's all about. Hey, we if we just had another entity with more power that is not answerable to the voters, how much easier it is to privatize public education, which is the holy grail of crazy people everywhere.
And Chelsea, like Ross said, you can't blame parents for wanting the best schools for their kids. And it's like we've all seen the meme with Eric Andre, and he shoots the guy, and he's like, "Oh, why would so and so do this?" And it's like that's the public school situation. The state government is like, "Why are these public schools failing? You kneecapped them, and now you're setting up your donor class to benefit from this. I mean, that's what I see. Chelsea, am I reading it wrong?
Oh, no, you're reading it correctly. And I've been on this show before talking about charter schools. And, I have kind of a different perception of charter schools just based off of some of these charter schools that were started out of necessity and not to take money from people. For example, you'll find charter schools sometimes that have been put together by Black community members for Black children to make sure that these Black children are not pushed out by all of the white children, getting all of these, being able to do things that maybe some of these other children can't do. So I have kind of, I understand where some of these charter schools feel like they need to come in. They are trying to help these children, but it's the industry. It's the industry in itself that is the problem.
Why is there the need?
Right, exactly. And it's 100% the schools. And what I'd like to say to the parents who are being lied to is take a second, look at all of the other legislation. They are cutting not just you off at the knees, but they are cutting your children off at the knees. If they don't give you a quality education, well, guess what? All of these laws that have rolled back labor laws for minors, well, your children can have a job. They don't need college. They can have a job. But I'm here to tell you that job's not very safe. It's not going to pay them what they're worth. It's not going to get them anywhere.
It's going to be in those meatpacking plants after they deported all the immigrants.
Exactly. And that's not safe work. I mean, it really isn't. Just look at the other legislation, and it is very, very obvious that they are trying to pigeonhole your children. Your children are not worthy of the good things in life. They need to hang out in the bottom, in the swamps with everybody else, making sure that the people up at the top continue to get paid, continue to profit off of our lives and our deaths.
Chelsea, you mentioned some of the other legislation, and this we were talking here about House Bill 1423. I do want to take a brief look at some of the other bills that are moving through the state legislature for a more full recap of what happened this week in the Indiana General Assembly and a look at the coming week. Check out the episode I did yesterday with Mad Voters this week at the Indiana State House on Progressive Indiana Network. Now, however, I do want to look at Senate Bill 76 in particular with you guys. Now, this is an ICE cooperation bill. The House passed it after it crossed over from the Senate, and it mandates that Indiana law enforcement, public schools, universities, and local governments must cooperate with federal immigration authorities and agencies, including ICE, or be sued for a $10,000 per incident violation. Now, the House passed this 61-28 on Thursday. It's heading back to the Senate for concurrence. This bill is further along in the process than a lot of other bills in the State House right now. Another one that I wanted to highlight is Senate Bill 91, which fortunately, this is actually a decent bill. This would extend Indiana's syringe exchange program. Originally, it was slated to extend it for 10 years. It's been amended to just kick the can down the road for 2 years. But the exchange program has helped reduce the spread of HIV and hepatitis. Without this extension, the program will expire. It is up for House amendments and a potential House vote this week. The state first legalized such programs in response to the Scott County HIV outbreak of 2015 and attaches a ton of conditions far from a full embrace of best harm reduction practices. Democrats have supported these programs with Republicans split. Some are adamantly opposed. Some actually see the benefit to these programs. And one other thing I did want to point out at the State House this week, Senate Bill 182, a bill that would erase legal recognition of trans, intersex, and non-binary Hoosiers, prohibit changes to birth certificates, contains bathroom ban language, sex segregation in correctional facilities, bathrooms, locker rooms. This awaits a committee hearing in the House this week. However, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles is already changing their policy. Thursday, the BMV stopped providing customers the option to change the gender marker on their state-issued ID, even with a court order or statement from a doctor. This change results from an executive order issued last year by Governor Mike Braun prohibiting, quote, modern gender ideology in state agencies. 2 public hearings about this rule produced massive opposition, which obviously was disregarded, as seems to be par for the course. Ross, of that legislation I mentioned, what particularly jumps out to you?
Well, I would be remiss not to first point out that, the hero of redistricting, Greg Walker, who is the current state senator here in District 41, I'm sure disappointed a lot of his people who gave him lots of credit in that, to find out, oh, lo and behold, he is a hardcore conservative Republican, and he votes for everything that hardcore conservative Republicans want. I think the issue always with sanctuary city laws is a real lack of understanding about what that even means. It's really about money and resources. So when you have the federal government coming into a city and saying, we want you to arrest undocumented immigrants who aren't committing any state crimes, we want you to house people who are not being held for trial in your district. And guess what? We're not paying you for that. I mean, that's what sanctuary cities have always been about, is cities saying, we got our own problems here, fellas. We got our own stuff to deal with here. We're dealing with crime. We're dealing with domestic violence. We're dealing with property crime. We're dealing with traffic. And we don't have the resources to do the federal government's job. It's never, ever been about, hey, we're going to round up a bunch of undocumented people and hide them from the feds. It's not about that. So it's based on a lie. It's based on a lot of baloney, as so many things are, but just really disappointing. I mean, if you think about, as a lawyer, think about when you write laws like this and you don't think about the consequences. Who's going to define what is cooperation? I mean,
that was my question. That's a pretty vague term.
Yeah. So did I cooperate fast enough? I'm sorry, you did not cooperate fast enough. That's $10,000. It's ridiculous. It's going to be tied up in well, maybe it is, because I mean, I think in a lot of places, it's just going to be an excuse for the idiots who are now running Indiana University, thanks to Mike Braun, for them to say, hey, nothing we can do. There's a law. So, hey, guess what? We're going to, what kind of international student is going to want to come to an Indiana university if they know that they're going to constantly be questioned, or that they can be turned over to ICE on some bogus charge? Nobody is. That's going to hurt our universities dramatically. But yeah, it's disappointing to see across the board Republicans agreeing to this, again, because you're talking about telling local law enforcement, telling local schools, you've got to help us do our job for free, which is not fiscally responsible, and it wastes their time. They're not set up to do these things. They're not trained. Well, I guess it doesn't matter now, because ICE isn't trained either. So they have a 5-week training program instead of 6 months now. So we got a whole bunch of untrained people. So
it's 47 days for a very specific reason. Yeah, it's pathetic. And Chelsea, let's talk about the other harms that could happen in the community because of this bill. Like, especially listen, the way it mandates that schools cooperate with ICE. What are they supposed to do? Just let these guys into their classrooms? I mean, we saw in Minnesota a few weeks ago where that poor kid Liam Ramos, the kid with the bunny hat, got him and his dad got shipped off to Texas. And listen, that's bad enough for him and his family, but think about, even if you're the most cruel-hearted person toward immigrants, What about the rest of the kids in that class who had their friend taken away from them? Who are traumatized. I don't think they're thinking about things like this. And then I also suspect, look, threatening schools with a $10,000 fine, is this just another way to kneecap public education and then say, oh, public education's failing, we need some charters?
Oh, of course. Of course. And I think the three of us are very aware of how the Republicans do things in Indiana. All of their legislation is up for debate. It's never incredibly clear. It's just like with our abortion ban. Doctors are going, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to save your life. And that's what we get in Indiana when we're talking about legislation. The legislation is just up for debate at all times. So these schools are going to be faced with this, like, we don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to get in trouble individually. We don't want them to shut down our school. We don't want to hurt our students. So, like, do we hurt all of our students by saying no to them? Or do we hurt a couple of students by allowing them to come in here and drag them out of the goddamn building in front of everybody? And either way, there's trauma there. And I think that that's another point of legislation, especially in a place like Indiana, where we have people who know that they're running things and can do whatever they want to. They want to harm us. They want to traumatize us, because the more they traumatize us, the less we feel capable of doing. We feel powerless. And, me in particular, you'll never make me feel powerless. I know that I have power, but I'm very lucky to stand in that privilege of knowing that I have power, and most other people don't have that. So it's going to cause chaos, and even the thought of it is going to be terrifying. My son, my 16-year-old son, has a girlfriend who is half Black, half Hispanic. Her mother came here from Mexico. She speaks mostly Spanish. We speak a little English to each other, but you can tell very, very thick accent. And I had a conversation with his girlfriend, and she's like, yeah, I'm very terrified, and my mom doesn't understand. She is an immigrant to this country, and she has really no understanding of how easy it would be for somebody at that school to call in Indiana and say, hey, I think that this student's mother is here illegally. This is their information. Go talk to them. And these types of things
kind
are
of
being
cooperation they're talking about,
yes, right? And these are the things that are being encouraged in our state. So we're literally talking about stripping students from schools where they're getting an education in front of everybody else. It's absolutely wild. This is Nazi Germany. This is the type of shit that they did.
Right.
And we know it's not necessary, right? We know it's not necessary. Right or wrong, the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, everybody did deportations without turning this into a police state, without forcing people to turn in their neighbors or show their papers. You can argue about the practicality of deportation. But we know you don't have to do it this way because we've seen it done.
We've seen it. And, to what Chelsea said, this stuff, it just demoralizes you. They want us desperate. And the stuff that makes us turn to addiction. We have a serious opioid crisis. It's not maybe as the peak of what it was a few years ago, but it's still out there, and we see things like this. This needle exchange program has worked, and there's still not enough buy-in. I mean, opponents of this thing have whittled it down from a 10-year extension. It has worked well for the last 10 years, and now they're only going to kick it down the road for 2 years. Ross, what do you think of this?
I think if you have a lizard brain, and you say, well, my God, if we give someone who is addicted to heroin a free needle, they're going to keep doing heroin. And boy, if we just got rid of those needles, that's the key. Is the free needles are causing people to be heroin addicts. it's moronic, but it's very simplistic. Again, if you have a lizard brain and you want to look at things in black and white, and oh my God, if I'm for free needles and somehow I think it's cool to shoot up, it makes sense. I mean, for the rest of us, it doesn't make any sense. There's no data behind it. They've probably never met someone who struggles with opioid addiction to know what makes them tick, to know what kind of help they really need. But nobody who knows anything about anything thinks that there's ever been a single person who woke up one day and said, "Hey, I hear there's free needles. I'm gonna try that heroin." That's awesome.
Right. And yeah, the needles, like you said, their needles aren't the problem. Folks are going to keep, heroin addicts are going to keep doing the heroin. You have to help them get into the rehab programs and wean themselves off. So like you said, there's data on how these things work. It seems like they just want to kick people while they're down. Along those lines, Chelsea, this attack on the trans and non-binary community, this bill is awaiting a committee hearing. I guess it could still be defeated. If you're listening out there or watching, we need you to contact your representatives, especially if they're on that committee, and say, hey, let's kill this thing here. But listen, we know how Indiana Republicans work. Can you speak to this one?
Well, so one thing I want to say so that people can hear is, first of all, harm reduction. We cannot get people off of drugs if they are dying from HIV. We cannot get people off of drugs. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how we get them off of drugs. We have to keep them alive long enough to get them the services that they need and to get them to understand that they are worthy of it. Again, a systemic issue. Addiction is a part of that. We are not giving people a chance at life. So they turn to drugs. They turn to things that numb the pain. And we as Hoosiers, we deserve better. And that's what you need to remember every single day that you're in this state and you're dealing with everything that's coming at us. We deserve better. We've seen, look at other places that have put things in place that have made things better. We know it can be done. We have to demand it. And we can't just sit around and no offense. Like watching this podcast, fantastic. You are educating yourself. What are you going to do with that? What is the next step for you? Watch this podcast, learn about what's going on, but then take that information and talk to your neighbor about it. Talk to your children. I'll talk to anybody who will let me talk to them. And sometimes I go into like places like coffee shops and I talk a little bit louder than I really need to, just in hopes that people will hear it and they'll hear something and go, oh my God. So it is up to us. We cannot sit back. And calling our legislators, that's fantastic. Do it. Even if you think it doesn't matter, there is somebody on the other end of that is hearing that. Maybe it's one of their assistants. Maybe it's not even one of them. And maybe your call is the one that makes that assistant go, okay, I'm done with this shit. This is crazy. I know things that other people don't know, and I'm going to put it out there. Like, your voice matters. And every time you use it, there is somebody that is going to hear you, that is going to appreciate it. So that I want to get that out, that this is up to us. We cannot leave it up to the powers that be.
And you know, as to the you spoke to harm reduction, right? I mean, letting trans and non-binary folks live their truth is a form of harm reduction and compassion. Something that our lieutenant governor lacks. Finally, this week, let's talk about this guy. So this is fun. We're gonna have a little bit of fun with this one. Recently, Republican Senator Ron Alting of Lafayette made a subtle dig at Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith during a public policy hearing, asking if Beckwith was needed to cast a tie-breaking vote. Alting asks in the video, quote, "Certainly we don't have to get the lieutenant governor. Tell me not for a tiebreaker, do we?" And then when a person off camera answers that he would not be needed, Alting says, "Oh, okay, God bless us, thank you." Now, Friday, Beckwith posted a video to social media, including clips from that hearing, and rattled off a list of grievances with Alting, citing instances where he broke with fellow Republicans on abortion and trans youth care and DEI initiatives. Alting was one of several GOP lawmakers to receive threats of violence late last year when he opposed President Trump's proposal to redraw Indiana's congressional maps. Beckwith supported the plan and has vowed to support challenges to those who did not go along. Now, some more Beckwith tangential related news. The son of Beckwith's best friend, podcast host, and lead pastor at the church where the lieutenant governor preaches, was sentenced to 6 years in prison on Friday after pleading guilty to child exploitation charges. Jonathan Peternell, son of Pastor Nathan Peternell, was arrested last October after uploading child sex abuse material on Snapchat. Investigators found more than 200 such files on the younger Peternell's devices, chat logs referencing a group called Diddy Disciples, and more than 50 images of his parents either nude or engaged in sex acts. Jonathan was apologetic during sentencing, apologized to his parents directly, and said his behavior was inconsistent with his upbringing in said church. Ross, bully this man.
I mean, when you're somebody who is too, stupid and crazy for Mike Braun, which he was, obviously people should remember, he was not Mike Braun's guy. They tried very, very hard to keep him out, but it turned out that the average Republican delegate party member wanted to choose crazy over not quite as crazy. So he's always been an anomaly, a bit of an outsider in that regard. But he also, you remember, he was chosen by the leaders of the Republican Party. So to say that, well, he's some kind of outlier, he's really not. But look, he's a grifter. He again, not the sharpest tool in the shed. And you just have to hear him talk to realize that he's not a smart guy. He and Diego and Todd Rokita and Mike Braun, I mean, look, Mike Braun did a outstanding job of inheriting his father's business. I mean, he inherited that business like you wouldn't believe. And he did a great job in doing that. Beyond that, I haven't seen much. The rest of these guys, again, if you're in a confederacy of dunces where you're all sitting around being stupid with one another, it's easy to make a video like Micah Beckwith did attacking a sitting state senator, looking like a used car salesman, looking like a TV preacher, looking like a combination of all of those things. Never mind that my church is full of sex scandals. Don't forget, it's not just the son. The father has been drawn into question for his counseling of young couples. In a very creepy, although unsurprising way, as well. So it's not like the apple fell too far from the tree, apparently.
Yes.
Again, I don't know. I wasn't there. But yeah, look, Micah Beckwith is a disgrace. Micah Beckwith, you know, when somebody comes out and says, God talked to me, not I talk to God or I have a relationship with God. People have their faith. But when a guy comes and says, God had a conversation with me and explained January 6th in explicit terms, I'm sorry. We want you to record that next time, please, because we would all like to see it. You know, it's been a while. It's been a while since the burning bush. We'd like to see, if you're the guy that God decided to talk to, of all things January 6th, we'd like to see it. So yeah, look, he's a grifter, he's a disgrace, he's a clown. I don't know what else I can say. It's just disappointing that a guy like this, and I don't look, You could see even Republicans roll their eyes at this guy. But that's where the Republican Party is. He's their standard bearer.
Chelsea, Ross said he looks like a grifter or a used car salesman. Look at that blazer. He looks like a couch. Is he trying to catch JD Vance? I will give you the last words this week. Bully this man.
I will say, I thought that this was literally, I was like, is this a Saturday Night Live skit right now? I was very confused when that particular video popped up on my screen. I was like, what is going on? And then, of course, I got a huge chuckle out of Ron. Just, I clapped. I watched it a couple of times because it was very funny. I'm not a huge fan of Ron's, but I digress. He is an embarrassment. It is absolutely embarrassing that this is what we have to deal with our lieutenant governor. And he reminds me of Mike Johnson. They're birds of a feather. And, and as soon as all of this stuff came out with his brother's son and all of that, I was like, so did they share a porn app? Like, are we looking? Like, does his dad know that this was the kind of stuff that he was into? It's all very, very questionable and disgusting. And I wish it was a skit. I really wish it was, because this is our reality, and that should terrify everybody.
Yeah, and Mike Braun's not exactly a spring chicken, so we're, one heartbeat away from Governor Micah Beckwith. Scary shit. Hate to leave on that note, but we have reached the end of our show. I did want to give each of you a chance to plug yourselves if that's what you're into, or at least say goodbye. Chelsea, I'm going to start here with you. Where can the folks find you online if they want to connect? If you want to connect, or plug somebody or something. I know you are working on Jackson Franklin's campaign, and he's going to be with us tonight at 7 p.m. for a virtual town hall. Yes, absolutely. If you guys want to talk to me, reach out social media. I am always up for conversations with people, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. We can have a good conversation. I'm definitely down for that. I am managing a campaign for Jackson Franklin for Congress right now. One of our youngest congressional candidates that we've seen in this state. I joined Jackson's campaign because I believe in him. And if you give him a chance, I think that you'll believe in him too. So definitely look into him. We've got great candidates across this state this year. Join a campaign. Find somebody you can believe in that doesn't make your stomach hurt when you think about voting for them, and put everything into their campaign. And if it's not Jackson Franklin's campaign, perhaps it would be Ross Thomas's campaign, which he can speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate being here. I know I talk too much, but you knew that when you invited me. I am the Bartholomew County Democratic Chairman. If you're in or around Bartholomew County and want to get involved in local politics, barthdems.org. We welcome you. I'm here at my headquarters now. We've got lots to do and lots of things to work on. I'm also running for state senate. We would love to have support. If you've heard me today and want to hear me talk more, please contact vote.rossthomas.com and reach me. Or if you want to tell me to shut up, please also go to voterossthomas.com. We are in a competitive district here. I'm running against either Greg Walker or Michelle Davis. They are in a pitched battle in the Republican primary, with no less than Donald Trump weighing in on who should be the Republican standard bearer. So we're ready to take on either one of those. We'd love some support. Absolutely. Thank you, Ross. And I also would love some support over here at Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network. Like we said, this is an independent media project. It relies solely on the generosity of kind patrons like you to make this information available for free to everybody. Again, we are at progressiveindiana.net and could also really use a follow on social media at Progressive Indiana Network on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the same handle.
Over on Blue Sky and TikTok, the handle is at PIN Indiana. You can find me at Who's Left on most of your social media sites, and you can DM me wherever you're at with any tips, ideas, feedback, or concerns. Again, back tonight with Jackson Franklin at 7 p.m. Tuesday, live on these same channels with Dana Black. Got another town hall next Sunday night with 9th District Democrat Kyle Rourke. Lots going on, always more content for you guys. Help us out wherever you can. But until we see you next time, I have been Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.